Despite persecution, or because of it, the Christian population reached near 10% of the Roman Empire by the beginning of the 4th century. With an effective structure of bishops and clergy spread throughout the empire, the church found recruits even within the Roman legions. In 306 AD, in far-off Britain, the Roman army declared a new emperor, Constantine. These fragments are part of a huge statue of him commissioned during his lifetime. Egotistical? Yes, but his impact on our history and on our modern world is indeed colossal.
Without Constantine, history would have been much different. That much we do know.
Had Constantine not ordered the 50 copies of the Gospel, we wouldn't have had the Gutenberg Bible rolling off the printing press in the 15th century.
Under Constantine, Christianity goes from being something which opposes the empire to being part of the empire, and then indeed you have to be a Christian in order to be a part of the empire at all.
Because of the enormity of the empire, it had 4 co-rulers. Constantine governed Britain, Gaul, and Spain. Maxentius, co-emperor in Rome, was unpopular and vulnerable. Constantine fought his way across Europe, ready to seize control of the entire western half of the empire. The decisive encounter was on the road to Rome at the Milvian Bridge. And it was here that the crucial battle against his co-ruler Maxentius was fought. But before that engagement, an extraordinary event is said to have occurred.
Constantine seems to have seen some kind of vision in the sky. Later historians have supposed it was a solar halo. Constantine's spin doctor, if we can call him that, Eusebius of Caesarea, very firmly said it was the Chi Rho signal, the symbol of Christ in the sky. And that was it. He became a Christian.
Having once worshipped the pagan sun god, Sol Invictus, Constantine now worshipped the Son of God, Jesus Christ. The following day, Constantine's vastly outnumbered troops fought carrying shields marked with the sign of the cross. In the battle, Maxentius was completely routed, and he was drowned in the river Tiber. Constantine had indeed won under the sign of the cross.
These frescoes indicate what we understand as the change in Constantine, the defeat of Maxentius at the Milvian Bridge, and then immediately afterwards the triumphal entry into Rome when Constantine becomes the only emperor of the West.
What happens to the loser, Maxentius?
Maxentius was fished out of the river and decapitated, and Constantine paraded his head in the triumphal march through the streets of Rome.
Oh, I see. There indeed. We see the head, yes, the crowned head, yes, of poor old Maxentius, having spent a night in the water of the Tiber. Parading your rival's head on a pole may not seem especially Christian.
The truth of Christianity in Constantine's mind was perhaps somewhat ambiguous. Constantine was an emperor. He was ruthless, he was ambitious, and he was very successful. At the same time, in his own way, I do think he embraced this son God, S-O-N and not S-U-N, to be the son of God, and therefore his hope in the afterlife of redemption.
Historians and churchmen have for centuries debated whether Constantine's conversion was more political than sincere. We're still guessing. Whatever it was, the conversion of Constantine was the single most important political event in the history of the Christian Church. By 313 AD, Constantine had implemented a policy of empire-wide religious toleration, giving the Christian Church open access to the wealth and power of the state. The pomp and ceremony of earthly rulers, for example the opening of Parliament, scarcely compares with the grandeur of the Pope and his cardinals. At this papal mass in St. Peter's, diplomats and clergy sit side by side. Secular governments must maintain relations with the papacy. As part of Constantine's legacy, the Pope is a highly significant figure in world politics. Imposing churches were built in Rome, including the first basilica of St. Peter's. But in those days, the most important was St. John in Lateran, still the cathedral of the city, though rebuilt and embellished over the centuries.
And we're now in St. John the Lateran Church, which is a very, very big church, but of course this isn't Constantine's church. How did his compare with this one?
It's an amazing similarity. We're looking at the same ground coverage.
But that is unbelievable. I mean, this church is enormous and feels enormous, and you're saying that in the 4th century Constantine constructed something at least of similar dimensions. Well, weren't the pagans pretty put out by these enormous buildings being erected for Christians?
Constantine's building program was very carefully laid out in such a way that most of the churches he built were outside the city walls to begin with. And even this church, the cathedral, this church was built on the farthest outskirts of the city. Right outside this church we see the city walls. Not only did he construct the enormous building, but he also gave beautiful marble columns. He gave 40 gold and silver chandeliers for the nave. He gave silver plate, gold plate, candlesticks. So he filled the church with beautiful objects.
For centuries, the Christians have been persecuted. They've been fed to lions. They've been living underground in catacombs. They've been worshipping in churches no bigger than a house. And then along comes Constantine and showers them with riches. Well, you're not going to say no, are you? You're not going to look a gift horse in the mouth. But if, since the time of Christ, you've been preaching, blessed are the meek and blessed are the poor, and then you inherit this, it's bound to change you, isn't it?
I think this is one of the most tragic periods for Christianity, if not tragic. It completely changes the meaning of Christianity. For example, Christians go from loving their enemies, as Jesus told them to do, to killing them on the battlefield and then praying for them. They go from setting slaves free to endorsing a system of slavery. They go from being opposed to torture to actually being part of those who do the imprisoning. You know, this is a complete 180-degree turn.
The Roman Senate erected this arch in honor of Constantine in AD 315, and it celebrates his divine inspiration. But nowhere does it mention the name Jesus Christ. The Christians were still a minority, and the Romans were anxious not to alienate the pagan majority. Rather than Constantine converting the empire to Christianity, it might be more accurate to say that he converted Christianity to his needs as an emperor.
Some Christians looked back to the early days of Christianity, and they looked back to the time of the martyrs and believed that in fact the empire should be separate from Christianity. And not everyone was delighted with being in the center of power.
The rapid growth of the monastic movement in this period was a quiet protest against what the church enthroned had become. In Christianity, why do we have monks? When does monasticism begin?
Before the time of Constantine, there were a lot of martyrs, and the martyr spirit was quite strong in those early centuries. When it became very unlikely that they would do that, in other words, martyrdom was no longer probable because the empire tolerated and encouraged Christianity, there were those who tried to embrace the martyr spirit in a new form, which was a form of rejection of the social context and living an exemplary life of asceticism and dedication, which was seen as another form of martyrdom or witness. But this dichotomy is already present in the New Testament, where you get some parts which suggest the importance of a faithful, responsible collaboration with the political authorities, for example, in some parts of St. Paul. On the other hand, there's a radically negative view, like in the book of Revelation, which more or less is saying that the political system is totally corrupt, and the only way forward is to somehow bypass it or overcome it because it's being destroyed. So already this dichotomy is present from the beginning.
Dissent and disagreement characterized the church from its earliest days. One argument threatened to tear it apart. Was Jesus more human than divine? If divine, how could he have died on the cross? But if human, how could he be resurrected or offer redemption? This long-running theological schism had powerful factions on each side. Constantine saw the threat to good order. He summoned the First Council of Nicaea in 325 AD to resolve the dispute. A special conference is a device still used today when political parties need to reconcile the irreconcilable. But it was less a deal than a victory for those who saw Jesus as inseparable from God. And unlike any settlement that I've ever been involved in, this one didn't come unstitched. It's endured for 17 centuries.
He gets all the theologians, the bishops together, and says, we've got to agree what we believe.
Now, why does he do that?
Unity. You've got to have religious unity. Religion is the glue that holds the social and political order together. If the religion goes wrong, if there's division within religion, then your social and political system is under threat.
After months of debate, Constantine eventually ruled that Jesus was of the same substance as God. In other words, officially divine. This was now